Good morning, everybody. I'm Angela Sierra. I am one of the co-chairs of our RIPA board, and I will now call our RIPA board meeting to order. Just really great to see everybody. I welcome everybody, our board members, old and new, and I welcome all the members of the public who are here today to engage with us on the important work we're doing. Really looking forward to today's meeting, given on this year's focus on racial profiling in policing and youth. We are engaging in a youth summit where we'll have 3 panels today. So that should be just really fascinating and really productive for us. And we will also be talking about the developments and the progress our subcommittees have been making in our draft report thus far. So we're going to be welcoming 3 new board members to our board, but before introducing them, I am going to turn it over to my co-chair and our other board members to briefly introduce themselves. I should mention I'm an attorney with the California Department of Justice. I'm in our Civil Rights Enforcement section. I've been with the RIPA board since its inception for the majority of the time that we have been working in this area. And I'm Rob Bonta, the Attorney General's designee. So I'm going to turn it over to my co-chair, Andrea Guerrero, who will be facilitating the second half of our meeting today. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela, and good morning, everyone. I'm Andrea Guerrero. I'm the Executive Director of Alliance San Diego, and I'm an appointee of Senate President Pro Tem Toni Atkins. Good to see everyone.
Thank you.
Should I pass it to somebody else?
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay, I will pass it to Chief Tullis.
Well, good morning, everybody. Sean Tullis, Police Chief in Beaumont, California, and I'm the appointed representative of the California Police Chiefs Association.
Great, thank you. Why don't we turn it over to Dr. Armeline? Maybe is that here, Pastor Kreiner?
Hello, Pastor Kreiner, Second West Baptist Church, Fresno, California, appointee of Attorney General Bonta.
Thank you.
I'll pass it to Wanda.
Good morning. My name is LaWanda Hawkins. I'm with a group called Justice for Murdered Children here in Los Angeles. I was appointed by former Governor Jerry Brown. And I'm going to turn it over to Lily.
Thank you, Board Member Hawkins. My name is Lily Kajavi. I'm a professor of mathematics at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm an appointee of the Attorney General's office. And I've been a little under the weather, so I'm very glad we can meet remotely for all of your sake, because I really wanted to be here today. All right, thank you. And can I pass it on to Board Member Randolph? Chief Randolph?
Good morning. Thank you, Ms. Lilly. My name is Rich Randolph. I am the Chief of Police at Cuesta College and glad to be here with all of you. I am a appointee or representing Porac, California. Thank you. And I'll pass it on to Board Member Pastor Kennedy.
All right. Good morning. I am Brian Kennedy. I serve at Mount Zion Church of Ontario. I'll pass it on to John Dobard.
Morning, John Dobard, he, him, Vice President of Policy and Programs at Catalyst, California, and an appointee of Speaker Emeritus Anthony Grindon. I'll pass it to Board Member Kulkarni.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Manju Kulkarni. I'm Executive Director of AAPI Equity Alliance and co-founder of Stop AAPI Hate. I was appointed by former Speaker Rendon. I will pass it to Amina Kazi, one of our new members.
Good morning, Amina Kazi, Co-Executive Director of Peace and Justice Law Center, and a new appointee of Attorney General Bonta, and I will pass it to Chauncey Smith.
Excuse me, you're on mute. We're having difficulty hearing you. No, we still can't hear you. Why don't we continue with introductions and circle back? Oh, actually, you
Great.
just lit up. Could you speak again? Chauncey Smith?
Hello.
Oh, we
Can you
can
hear
hear
me?
you now. Yes.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Chauncey Smith, he, him, his. I'm an associate director at Catalyst, California. There, I run our Reimagine Justice and Safety program, which focuses on criminal legal system and community safety issues. And I am an appointee of Attorney General Rob Bonta. Pleasure to meet everyone. Look forward to working with you as a member of the RIPA board. And I'll pass it off to the next person.
Let's see, maybe Chavez. Or Ronaldo Villeda. So DOJ staff, do we have everybody that, are we missing anybody that is on line today?
Yes, this is Daniel Marmaleo from San Bernardino County Superintendent of Schools.
Oh, great. Great, thank you. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. And I wanted again to welcome our new board members. We're really looking forward to getting to know you and working with you. It's been a really good year, and we're, very, excuse me? Oh. It's been a very engaged board, a very engaged subcommittee. So we're really looking forward to working with you and hearing your perspectives and ideas on our work. And just I wanted just to give folks a little bit more information about our new board members. I'll start with Captain Darren Green. As he noted, he's a designee of the Commissioner of the California Highway Patrol. He's a 24-year veteran of the CHP. During his tenure, Captain Green has worked in various field and administrative positions throughout the state of California at all ranks. He has broadened his law enforcement knowledge by sitting on promotional panels for allied law enforcement agencies, as well as traveling to the Republic of Kenya to provide internal investigation and evidence collection training for the Kenyan National Police Service. He also enthusiastically has provided community service by volunteering to coach girls and boys basketball teams. So welcome, Captain Green. I don't know if there's any, if you'd like to say anything else or add anything.
I'd just like to say good morning and thank you very much for the introduction. And I'm excited to be here and be a part of the board.
Perfect. Look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Our next new board member is Amina Kazi. Ms. Kazi is a movement lawyer and community advocate, currently serving, as she noted, as the co-executive director of the Peace and Justice Law Center. That is an Orange County-based nonprofit legal organization committed to promoting community safety by combating state violence, reducing entanglement with the criminal legal system, and dismantling inequities in the criminal legal system and policing policies and practices. Ms. Kazi provides civil rights legal services for individuals claiming biased policing, racial profiling, and excessive use of force, while working directly with families of loved ones killed during police encounters who are seeking justice and accountability. She is formerly the Deputy Executive Director and Staff Attorney for the Council on American Islamic Relations in the Greater Los Angeles Area Chapter, and she has advocated for the civil rights of the American Muslim community and against the government's expansive surveillance infrastructure. So welcome, Ms. Kazi, and I'll turn it over to you if there's anything that you would like to add.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair Sierra. Very good to meet all of you. I'm also very excited and honored to serve in this capacity, and also very eager to learn from all of you and from our panelists and the public today. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you. And our third new board member is Chauncey Smith. As Mr. Smith noted, he has been appointed by Attorney General Rob Bonta. He is the Associate Director of Reimagine Justice and Safety at Catalyst, California. His work focuses on building political power and transforming public systems to advance racial and economic equity. He's also served on numerous task forces relating to policing and community safety, including the Los Angeles Department of Transportation's Task Force on Non-Law Enforcement Alternatives to Traffic Safety, the Public Safety Advisory Committee of the LA County Metropolitan Transportation Authority, and the California Board of State and Community Corrections Executive Steering Committee on Strengthening Police-Community Relations. So welcome, Chauncey Smith, and I'll turn it over to you if there's anything that you would like to add.
Thank you for the introduction, Angela. Greatly appreciate it. As mentioned before, very honored to serve in this position, to be a member of the board. I look forward to working with everyone to address issues of racial identity profiling and also learning from you, and I'm just very grateful for the opportunity.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Look forward to working with you as well. Okay, so next on our agenda is the review of our March 22nd, 2024 full board meeting minutes. So I know those have been sent to us ahead of time. I'll give everybody a few moments to pull them up or take a look at them, and then we can open it up to see if anybody has any comments or corrections to those minutes. So I'll give everybody a minute or two for that. Okay, does anybody have any comments or corrections for the board meeting minutes? Lily?
I just have a very minor correction for the mention of the post subcommittee on page 4. That board member Kulkarni is one of the co-chairs, and inadvertently I was listed as one of the co-chairs. And I think DOJ might just make easy note of that. That's minor correction. Thank you.
Great. No, thank you. It will make that correction. Any other corrections? Okay. Not hearing any, do I hear a motion to approve the March 22nd, 2024 board meeting minutes?
So moved.
So moved.
Okay, and do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Great. Okay, DOJ, you want to take a roll call, please?
Yes. Kreiner,
Yes.
Dobard,
Aye.
Green,
Aye.
Guerrero,
Aye.
Hawkins, Kennedy,
Yes.
Kajabi,
Aye.
Kulkarni,
Aye.
I apologize, I might mispronounce this. Quasi, is that how you say it?
Yeah, Kazi, abstain.
Quasi. Okay. Randolph,
Aye.
Sierra,
Aye.
Tulis,
Aye.
Vieta. Circling back to Hawkins. The ayes have it. The meeting minutes have been approved.
Terrific. Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the subcommittee reports. So I'll invite the co-chairs or the presenters we'll start with the Stop Data Subcommittee.
Thank you very much. That's me. I'm Board Member Kajabi. Board Member Bianco's a co-chair, but it's today, but I'll present just a brief summary. So the subcommittee met last week on Tuesday, and we had an important first look at the data analysis for this year. So our meeting was really focused on centered on an update from DOJ, first analysis of the most recent year's stop data. I'll just remind everyone we're in wave 4 of the RIPA data collection, so meaning that any summaries for the full data set really represent all law enforcement agencies across the state. So there are over 4.7 million stops and reported last year involving 539 law enforcement agencies. And summary slides were provided, I believe, with the meeting materials. And you'll see that the shared materials really give us a first view into stops of youth, so ages 17 and under, and also emerging adults, and looking at a variety of the questions we often are interested in around data, but with respect to age. So I'm not going to go through all of the slides. We have them, but I just want to say that there are themes that emerge in the data for youth that are similar to overall trends that we've seen in every year of the RIPA data. I want to highlight 3 items. The most stark here is the data demonstrating that Black youth are much more likely to be stopped. For civilians overall, also statewide, those pedestrians and drivers and passengers who are Black are most likely to be handcuffed, although less likely to be issued citations. And for youth, those stops are also much more likely to involve a field interview. And so I'm really looking forward to today's discussion. We're really going to get a view into recommendations and a window into really how to think about the experience of youth in California. Beyond race and ethnicity, individuals with disabilities were also looked at, and they're more likely to have stops that involve actions taken, such as handcuffing, than those without disabilities are. Because this data is a large statewide set, there was also a discussion about how to report out stop data to make it as accessible as possible to the public, for agencies to use. There was a presentation by DOJ about ways to consider dividing California into regions. And one possible of the approaches that were shared, one idea that seems promising is to base regions somewhat on Department of Transportation divisions. Another important point that was made in discussion and also really came through in the public comment was the value of accessing data for individual law enforcement agencies. It's a very large state and agencies of very different sizes, and the statewide aggregated tallies may not really show us what's happening regionally and for individual agencies. And also the importance came out, the importance of making the data accessible so it isn't inadvertently buried in tables in a report in a way that isn't as useful to our communities. There's a strong interest in DOJ's creating another statewide data dashboard that was previously available, and in the meantime, having static ways to share data. There are a number of law enforcement agencies in the state that have created their own data dashboards to make the data available. And finally, there was a discussion about continuing data analysis from past years, especially where there's a direct connection to recommendations that have been made. So especially around pretextual stops, around the use of consent in searches, and field interview cards. And so that's a general summary of our last meeting. If there's anyone here from the subcommittee who wants to add to that, that's my report as co-chair. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Now, anybody else? Oh, and we have a question from Rich Randolph.
Thank you, Chair Kajabi. You threw it all out. Thank you so much. The one thing I forgot that you forgot to bring up was we talked about diversion programs that many of the agencies have been talking about. We talked about possibly looking into that for the future. And one thing I did bring up is the collection of data, which is there's been a misconception with various law enforcement agencies as far as the reporting data goes to DOJ. As far as a citation goes, that's a detainment, that's an arrest. A citation is taken as an arrest, and so many agencies and many chiefs have expressed the concerns that that is taken as people are placed in handcuffs, and that is not the case. So there was like there was anomalies that were brought up that I did share. I just wanted to make sure that that affects some of the numbers that are being thrown out today. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Randolph. Is there anybody else from the subcommittee that would like to comment, or and anybody from the board who have any comments or questions for the subcommittee? Yeah, I'll just add, I just think from what we've seen so far, what you've shared, it's really helpful. I personally think that it's really been significant that a report and these statistics are breaking up the various ages within youth. I think that's really interesting and important. And also, to the extent that we can look at geographic areas or sizes of law enforcement and what those differences look like with these numbers, I think that could be, very helpful for both to our work as well as to law enforcement agencies. And finally, Chief Randolph, with respect to the point you're making, so I guess what I'm hearing is that right now with our data, we cannot break up within citations which ones are involving handcuffs or which ones are not, but it's just something that we need to make observations for and point out in the report. Is that the suggestion?
Yes. Thank you so much, Angela. Yes. So I made contact with several chiefs, and Chief Talese can comment on this if he wants as well. When an officer or a school resource officer makes contact with a student regarding a citation, or even contact with, as far as a citation being issued, that constitutes in law enforcement terms as an arrest. And some agencies have entered that data as an arrest. That data has been processed through the RIPA protocol to DOJ, and yes, is being documented as arrest, and now it's being put in our report that this agency A has made 50 arrests, and that is not the case. It could have been 40 arrests, 40 contacts where a citation was issued. And then the other platform is diversion. A lot of agencies, the majority of agencies, are doing diversion programs. So that citation would help that family and that student go into a diversion program. But still, though, the report is showing as a citation was issued and an arrest was made. And so, yes, the numbers are concerning. And so we just need some clarification from this point moving on for next year, for next report, and also for this report. So, but thank you.
Okay. And then I have one other question, and this may be either the subcommittee or our DOJ staff. Would we have RIPA data that would help us understand what the numbers are for diversion programs? Is that something that we can track right now?
Hi, it's nice to see all of you. Just to jump in real quick. So what's interesting about what the data tracks, it's really from the moment of the stop till the end of that contact. So what happens as far as those steps after, whether someone's referred to probation or diverted, is not typically captured in the RIPA data. So I hope that helps answer this question, and really hope we can have a robust discussion of this in the discussion of the report draft after finishing these report out. So thank you all for this engagement, really appreciate it, but hope we can save all of these great thoughts for our discussion later today. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so not hearing any other questions, I will move it on to the report from the State and Local RIPA Policies Committee, Subcommittee.
Yes, and I'll be reporting out on behalf of the subcommittee. So we met on June 5th, and majority of the time was spent reviewing the draft policy section for the 2025 report. DOJ provided an overview, so talked about the 4 different sections of the policy section. And subcommittee members expressed excitement and approval about that structure and the direction of the section. Members also provided some feedback and recommendations. This included recommendations to include some more categories to the grid on law enforcement agencies' policies related to youth. So that is, as folks have seen, one of the key sections of the policies report, policies related to police interactions with youth. And there's a grid there. So there were some recommendations to include more categories. And so now DOJ is going to gather information on policies related to use of force, youth interviews, or field interview cards, cow gang, and youth diversion. So I see some of the recommendations that were mentioned in the meeting reflected in the draft report that was shared out with you all for this meeting. So that's great to see. So that's the gist of the meeting. Is there anything that other subcommittee members would like to add?
Yep. Okay, thank you, John. And does anybody have any questions just from this readout of the subcommittee meeting? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to our Accountability and Civilian Complaint Subcommittee. Invite our co-chairs to give us a readout on that. Okay. Let's see, for now, why don't I turn to the Post-Training and Recruitment Subcommittee?
Hi. Oh,
hello.
Yeah, can I go ahead? Or I didn't know if Ronnie was on.
Yes,
okay,
please.
great. So I'll keep this brief. At our last subcommittee meeting, the board reviewed the post section of the 2025 board report, and the subcommittee members provided feedback and guidance on a number of different areas of the report. During the meeting, we also discussed the development of guidelines and the post-curriculum guidelines workshop hosted at the Museum of Tolerance. We discussed Regulation 1205 as well as legislative updates. On June 13th, Ronnie and I attended the post commission meeting in Sacramento, and their post presented its responses to the 2024 report recommendations. In terms of where we are, and we actually, Ronnie and I reported out on the findings of last year's report, as well as legislative updates and regulations. Moving forward, we're going to be reviewing posts responses to the 2024 report recommendations, and we're going to continue to work on the guidelines with Post, and we're very much looking forward to attending their next workshop on October 8th and 9th, again, involving the trainings of the Museum of Tolerance. And that is it.
Great. Thank you, Manju. Anybody else from the subcommittee have anything else they want to add? Or any questions from the board? No. Okay, and I'll go back just briefly here. Is there anyone from the Accountability and Civilian Complaints Subcommittee that would like to discuss the last meeting? Okay. Well, not hearing any, we have next on our agenda a 5-minute break. So it's 11:36. Why don't we come back at, 10:36. Why don't we come back at 10:41? And then we'll start our Youth Summit
Sister
panel.
Chair,
Yes,
Sister Chair,
yes.
point of order. I believe I lost a bit of reception. This is Pastor Kreiner. I am on for civilian and complaints, but if you want to do it after our break, that's perfectly okay as well. But forgive me, I lost a little bit of reception, so I was gone for about 2 minutes.
No problem. Why don't you go ahead and then we can take our break.
Okay, so no problem at all. So as a pastor, I know how people are when a pastor talks long, so I'll keep it as quick as possible. Okay, Rich, this is for you, bro. All right. So our last meeting was held on May 21st, 2004 at 9 a.m. Our chair, LaWanda Hawkins, facilitated our discussion. The subcommittee reviewed the drafts of the civilian reports and accountability sections of the report. The civilian complaint section draft include a review of AB 2923, which establishes a uniform definition of complaint and modifies the language of that advisory warning about filing false complaints. The board acknowledged the attempt of the legislator to address some of the issues around civilian complaints. Some civilian complaints that the board had identified. The subcommittee agreed it would be premature for the board to make a comment on the bill at this time because it is not clear what is going to happen with the bill. The board would like to reaffirm its recommendations and prior reports to track complaints and would like to report to examine whether the SB2 process tracks complaints and determine if any SB2 process for track complaints could be adopted for all civilian complaints. The draft will continue to develop the section on root cause analysis. The accountability section. The board asked that the draft explicitly tie SB2 to the purpose of RIPA and the mission of RIPA board to eliminate racial and identity profiling. The board had some questions about data and asked for clarification around the time frame for data on the number of decertifications and frequency of decertification. The board members want the data section to highlight that the reporting on decertification is retroactive for the first year. Members also inquired whether the report could show which LEAs have the allegations included in the data chart and current draft of the report. Lastly, the subcommittee members would like to invite representatives from Post to provide an overview of SB2 and discuss how SB2 works on the ground. Mr. Chair, and to our board members, that is a report out for our Accountability and Civilian Complaints Subcommittee. If there are any committee members that would like to report, please, I invite you for that time. If not, Sister Chair, this is our report.
Terrific. Thank you, Pastor Kreiner. If anybody has any questions? If not,
This is board member.
Yes.
This is board member LaWanda, and I would like to thank Pastor Greiner, but also there needs to be clarification of SB2. I don't know if everyone's aware of this bill and that do they understand this bill, because it just went into place.
Great. Yes. Yes. And I do think right now in our draft, we can talk about when we latter part of our meeting, we'll talk about that as well. Because I think right now we do have a lot of information about it, but maybe we can add some more. So thank you, LaWanda. Okay. So with that, we will take a 5-minute break and we'll come
Angela,
back at 10:45. Sure.
Could I stop you just for a moment? So we'll be starting our panels here very soon. We'll have our first panel here starting at 11. So we'll ask that board members get back signed on here in about 10 minutes, just so we can make sure we have quorum and everything set so we can get started on time. Sorry to interrupt you, board members here. I just wanted to give us that space.
Oh, no, I appreciate that. I thought we were actually running a little behind. So you want us back in 10 minutes?
Yes, please.
Okay. Terrific. Okay. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you in 10 minutes.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon. We're still waiting for a few more board members to rejoin us, and we're lining up our speaker panel as I speak. And so I hope we'll be able to get started here very quickly. But thank you all for jumping back on camera and being patient as we get this set up for you all. But very much looking forward to these panelists and all of your thoughts on it as well. I'll check back in here shortly, but we're just waiting for a few more board members to come back on. And then we're setting up our first panel. So we hope to get that started at 11 o'clock sharp. But thank you all. I will check back in here shortly. Just a few reminders as we wait. In your meeting materials today, you were provided a quick sheet that has a list of all of our different panelists who will be speaking with you today, as well as just a short summary of what each panel will discuss. So if you're interested, including members of the public, please take a look, get to know some of our panelists that way. So that is attached to your meeting materials. Also attached, you'll see a copy of the draft 2025 report. And we are definitely looking forward to your feedback later in the agenda, and also feedback from members of the public as well. And so that's also posted online. And then kind of the last meeting material we have for you all is a copy of the STOP data presentation that was given last week. And you'll see a couple of different slides that were presented to the subcommittee that includes graphs and other charts to discuss as well. So those are all included in your meeting materials, and they should all be publicly available as well. So hoping that that information will be useful to you all. And we're really excited to get the report to you all at this time of year. It's really a huge lift for our team, and we're really excited to be able to get you this report now and start getting your feedback. So very much looking forward to this discussion. Just wanted to flag some of those meeting materials for you. As we're getting our panelists set up, another gentle reminder for our board members. Tomorrow, we're going to be sending out a survey to try to get your availability for our October and November meetings. So I do want to flag that we're hoping to get those set earlier in the year, so we can kind of map out the next couple of months as far as subcommittee meetings and drafting. So just a reminder, I'll remind folks at the end of the meeting as well. We do have a survey that will be sent to board members so we can start scheduling our October and November meetings. So ask that when that becomes available tomorrow, folks reply promptly, just so we can start making those arrangements for folks. So just one more reminder as we get set up here. So it does look like we have all of our panelists on. Thank you so much for joining. We're going to pull up the PowerPoint presentation, but before we do so, I think we're going to go ahead and start with some introductions. And so I will pass it off to my team.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Aisha Martin Walton. I'm with the Department of Justice, RIPA team. And I want to thank everyone for joining the Racial and Identity Profiling Act, or RIPA Board's Youth Summit. As part of the board's ongoing work, it is hosting today's summit to hear from youth advocates, stakeholders, and youth organizations that work in this space, as well as professionals in law enforcement, about the challenges that arise from interactions between youth and police, and hear about promising strategies and policies for addressing those challenges. Youth in California have a significant number of interactions with law enforcement. We heard about some this morning. According to the 2022 RIPA data, 815,360 stops were of youth under age 25. The California Department of Justice's 2022 Juvenile Justice Report showed that there were 26,000 arrests of youth under 18 in 2022. This year's report, analyzing data from 2023 and the second full year of reporting, will show 823,773 stops of persons under age 25, or an increase of 8,413. Sometimes these interactions turn deadly. The Washington Post Police Shootings Database shows that between 2015 and 2024, 23 youth under the age of 18 were killed in California. Throughout this presentation of during this Youth Summit section, you will be able to find links to these references in the chat. We are here today to hear from very knowledgeable panelists about these issues and some solutions for solving them. We will have 3 panels, each with 3 panelists, all of who are doing work in California. Each of the 3 panels will address one aspect of interactions between youth and law enforcement. And as Kendall mentioned earlier, you have this information in the materials. The first panel will discuss the criminalization of youth and youthful behavior through policies and practices like the use of status offenses, hotspot policing, and allegations of gang affiliation in policing youth. The second panel, The second panel will discuss best practices for probation, diversion, and deflection alternatives, non-carceral and non-police alternative programs for youth, and strategies for investing in communities. The third and final panel will discuss law enforcement policies for youth interaction and model policies and guidelines for engaging youth and reducing harm to communities. Each panel will be given 50 minutes, and each panelist will have 10 minutes to present. Board members will then have about 20 minutes to ask questions and engage in a brief discussion with the panelists. Board members will also have an opportunity to provide final reflections on the summit later in the meeting. The board has also reserved, as usual, time for public comment at the end of the meeting. To ensure as many people who want to speak will be able to do so, we are asking members of the public to take 2 minutes each to share their comments. In fairness to all speakers, we appreciate your understanding in advance if politely you're reminded that you're out of time. So now let's get started. But before we turn it over to our first 3 panelists, we have invited Ms. Lisa Thoreau, the Executive Director at Strategies for Youth, to share some basic information about the unique developmental vulnerabilities of youth and provide context for the concerns that will be raised here today. We ask that all panelists for panel 1 to turn their cameras on. Ms. Thoreau, welcome, and you may begin.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being invited today, and the tall task of explaining all the physical changes that the adolescent brain is experiencing is hard to achieve in 5 minutes, but I'm from New York originally, so I'll speak quickly. So it's critical to understand that adolescence is a time of tremendous brain change, and it's not about brain lobes growing, it's about how well brains are connecting internally through all sorts of medical terms, which I will spare you. What we are seeing with youth, and what often makes this a challenge for law enforcement, is that they are perceiving information, but they're processing it not in their frontal lobe, but in their amygdala. And the amygdala is something that is probably the most primitive part of the brain, and in many ways is linked to the survival functions that are essential for being alive. What youth do to take what they see and understand it and perceive it is thus channeled through one of the least sophisticated parts of the brain. When youth perceive information and bring meaning to it, and they process it through the amygdala, they respond to stimulus quite differently than adults do. So there are wonderful studies that have been replicated hundreds of times showing that a youth may perceive fear in my face, but anger in a person who's actually trying to express anger, or the reverse. Imagine the difference between seeing a famous person's face up close and then seeing a Halloween plastic mask of it. These are some of the differences in the way youth perceive and process. Much is exaggerated, and some of what is perceived is not there. This is especially true of how youth understand moods and social cues from other people. There are key differences as a result. Misreading cues, doing what they think is wanted, or reactively doing what is not wanted, reacting instead of considering all the information, acting instead of thinking, and then being surprised by their own actions and unable to explain them. They have a short horizon. They want to do, as any public defender will tell you, what will get them out of the situation the fastest. And they are hyper responsive to rewards and less so to punishment, which is a key consideration for law enforcement and anyone working with teens in the juvenile justice system. They give no thought to consequences or assume all possible consequences and impacts to their actions will be cool, awesome, and not cause any serious injury or harm. They think they're immune to that all too often. They assume and infer messages that are not being given often, and they sense feelings in such an intense way that it's only rivaled by their inability to contain or not express some of those feelings. They therefore escalate some kinds of very normal interactions or normal developments very intensely, either through excitement or fear or giddiness, and their imagination inflates and deflates as a result. In short, they have difficulty with self-regulation of their emotional aspects of conduct, and that is typically viewed, or has been historically, as the task of adults to help youth with, as well as institutions. Finally, they have difficulty with some kinds of abstractions of social conduct. So they may be very good at math or physics, but they can't always translate that abstraction into what would be some abstract social rules. And frankly, as folks will tell you, hot cognition overwhelms a lot of their cold cognition. But the good news is the frontal lobe during adolescence is also growing. And as we wait steadfastly for it to grow, we hope it will come to mature for how it helps youth to do the following: organize their thoughts, organize their actions to complete a task, and then plan their actions. And without these skills, you will see some youth are frustrated, very forgetful, angry, they feel incompetent and therefore even more threatened, and lash out verbally and sometimes physically because they cannot achieve what they envisage they should achieve or want to achieve. Once youth can sequence tasks, ideas, and actions, they can also think about consequences. Yes, it may be wise not to ride on the roof of your friend's car on a highway, and especially on the day before you have a big game where you're expected to run. But sometimes this is too difficult for them. I was just reading an article in a police summary about a group of kids who are playing a video game at home. This inability to recognize it was best to keep it there led them to go to a local grocery store and use an airsoft rifle to shoot their friends who were dodging between the aisles, because that was fun. What could possibly go wrong? You add to this cultural and developmental milestones in which the power of peer influence, which is literally measurable in the teen brain. This is not something that's solely a matter of character, in which youth are physically and socially profoundly affected by their ability to engage with peers, is incredibly important and certainly fueled by some aspects of American culture, such as social media. It is at this stage when similarly dysregulated youth are thinking together, they move in groups, they take action together, they dare each other to do things that are great, horrifying, dangerous, kind, brilliant, and harmful, and consequences are dared and explored and checked, because they're also about boundary testing. This is the age when self-image is often more important than self-interest, often to youth's harm. To be sure, this is not an easy age to parent. It's much less an easy age to police with young people you don't know and have difficult forming rapport. And it explains, in our view, the necessity of training and policies to equip officers when they do interact with this age. My one last point, since this is the RIPA board, is that normative factors that make all youth vulnerable in police interactions are heightened for racialized youth due to stereotype threat, experiences with authority figures, and intergenerational, vicarious, and sometimes personal trauma. I'm sorry I couldn't go in more depth, but I hope this gives you an idea of what some youth are going through, and all youth go through to one degree or another.
Thank you so much, Ms. Thoreau. Thank you for setting the table for us and providing that needed context. We will now turn the discussion over to our first three panelists. And again, just a friendly reminder for the panelists, if you are speaking on this panel, please keep your camera on throughout the entire hour. However, just turn your mics on when you are speaking. The first panelist I would like to just acknowledge is Jasmine Della Fosse, Director of Organizing and Community Engagement at the End Poverty in California, or EPIC, and also a member of the Stockton Education Equity Coalition. Next, we have Dudene Brow, Youth Advocacy and Program Coordinator at the Urban Peace Movement. And lastly, Annalisa Ruiz, Policy Director at the Young Women's Freedom Center. And as a reminder, you each have 10 minutes to present, and then we will open it up for board members. Panelists, you have the floor, and Ms. Della Fosse, if it's okay, we would like to begin with you. Good morning.
For the invitation to participate in this panel, and even more grateful to participate with my fellow panelists who are incredible leaders in their communities and across the state. And we're lucky to have them here with us and to share their wisdom and knowledge of what's going on in their communities. My name is Jasmine Della Fosse. I'm a community organizer and also have worked with young people across San Joaquin County over the last decade. And my work is really been centered around supporting and ensuring young people have a proper space to heal and thrive. My coming into this work really started as a youth organizer and as a young person who firsthand experienced policing and over-policing in communities growing up in South Stockton, and also over-policing in schools. I was at one of the schools that had one of the highest arrest rates and citations in Stockton Unified at Edison High School, and also was there during the time where we seen the highest arrest, where over 41% of student arrests were cited by school police officers that were in Black and Brown communities across the city. I work at the intersection of violence prevention, education reform, and anti-racism. So really excited to jump into this discussion that we have here this morning. As we think about sort of talking about status offenses, hotspot policing, allegations of gang affiliation, I want to sort of preface that these issues are still current and really relevant to experiences young people are facing. I guess I would start with sharing about how these activities around status offenses both are impact both schools and community. When we think about status offenses, oftentimes folks may be wondering, like, what does that look like? So examples of status offenses could be anything from addressing truancy, curfew violations, young people running away from home. And when we think about that, oftentimes in schools, one of the things that led us into looking at over-policing in schools was that that's exactly what Stockton was doing. We were oversighting young people for truancies and curfew violations, and not really getting a full scope of understanding what was happening. Stockton, Black and brown students in Stockton were 3 times more likely to be cited for truancy compared to their white peers. We also seen that there was disproportionate punishment that led students from missing schools, getting academic setbacks, and increasing the risk of dropout. In other words, we call this the school to prison pipeline. When we talk about hotspot policing in Stockton, we been focused, a lot of times we focus on high crime areas. I'm also a part of our city manager's review board for the city of Stockton, which oversees our policing biases and areas where our police department chief, as well as our city manager, is taking a look at really addressing what are we doing and what can we be doing better. What we learned in these sessions was that many of the citations and citations that were happening across Stockton were ticket trafficking. And oftentimes the ticket trafficking landed up to be over 70%, was triple the amount of stops for Black youth and adults, more than we've seen by any race. So we ended up creating a red flag system, recognizing that when there are too many stops, what can we do to be able to create policies and things that don't directly have our law enforcement department doing direct stops related to trafficking that lead to incarceration. One of the other things that we've also seen with hotspot policing was we had targeted surveillance. I oftentimes take my nieces and nephews to go to a Sky Zone, a local Sky Zone community place where youth gather over the weekend, where they are able to hang out and have fun. But what we see happen oftentimes is that while young people are jumping at Sky Zone, the whole parking lot is filled with law enforcement, waiting for young people, scoping them while they're going in and out of these facilities. Rather than over-policing and having examples of that, we share too often that it becomes too normalized, where young people are oftentimes being arrested and cited just for going to have fun at a local Sky Zone facility. Our recommendations to our city and our law enforcement agencies have been to work with our credible messengers, work with our organizations to have our local organizations have their youth staff facilitate evening sessions, have their youth staff be able to be out there versus law enforcement cars and policing in these facilities. In Stockton, hotspot policing has led to over-policing, specifically certain neighborhoods where we've seen far too often low-income and minority communities, specifically in South Stockton, over-policed, where there's created an atmosphere of mistrust and fear among young people, discouraging them to participate in community activities. Meanwhile, organizers like ourselves and community-based organizations are working at the forefront to build trust and also to develop our own community alternatives to law enforcement and policing in schools. when we talk about allegations to gang affiliations, this is something that young people have expressed to us far too often, that due to the association of their peers or the way they dress or even their haircuts, that they've been penalized in schools for the way their haircut style it is, and have been also told that these are gang haircuts and that they have to be affiliated, and not allowing young people to express themselves even if there is no affiliation. And we've seen that be penalized in both in schools and both in community, where it's both shows up in the courtrooms when these young people are in there. I also work in the juvenile halls on a weekly basis, where I see young people in and out of these facilities and attend courts. And I have seen where low-level incidences should have been diverted. So our recommendations continue to be work with our community-based organizations for de-escalation. And I'll wrap up here in just saying, as we continue to think about investments, our Stockton Education Equity Coalition has been very committed to ensuring that we continue to invest currently in hiring more staff that are restorative justice coordinators, community counselors, peer counselors, community-based organizations, credible messengers, and ensuring that we divest in our school police funds that have been used for that. Our recommendations have been continuing to be to not expend or suspend students who are not meeting grade level or literacy. And we're asking for districts across the city to continue to have oversight committees that will review policies and procedures that continue to impact Black and Brown students. So I'm not sure how I am in time. I think I'm maybe over. I'm trying to.
You are good.
Okay, I'm trying to rush through this.
You have about a minute, about 2 minutes left.
Okay. We also, as folks who are here who are from law enforcement agencies or from community-based organizations, we have asked to mandate that police never use physical force on students in schools, including the use of mechanical restraints unless students' behavior poses an imminent danger. We've also asked schools to ensure that police adhere to the California Welfare Institution 625.6, which states that prior to a custodial interrogation that they are consulting with legal counsel. Oftentimes young people are put in situations where they're cornered and they feel like they don't have any rights and they don't know how to, they don't know what to do in a situation. And we ask that you respect their right to legal counsel and ensuring that they do feel safe and that there is an advocate able to help them understand what is going on. Oftentimes, it is those interactions that lead to further policing, where young people sometimes end up in a very, in a position where it's not in their favor. And we encourage that law enforcement be able to continue to understand the importance of giving young people that opportunity. And lastly, I just want to emphasize on collecting of comprehensive data. One of the biggest issues here is that there is no data to help advocate or tell the stories that we continue to talk about here because of the lack of collection or transparency that exists. And so one of the things that we wanted to share is that both school district law enforcement agencies as well as city agencies and all law enforcement agencies to collect data that's comprehensive, broken out by race, sex, also status by English learner or students with disabilities, to be able to really understand the nuances of what's happening with young people. And so I will give my time to Dudene.
Thank you so much, Ms. Delafos, for that valuable information. And Mr. Dudene Brow, you are on. Good morning.
Can everyone hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dudene Brew. I'm the Youth Advocacy Programs Coordinator at Urban Peace Movement. I also lead our one of our youth leadership development programs called Determination Black Men's Group. that specifically works with, systems impacted young Black men between the ages of 16 to 26. I actually have some older folks in the space as well, because I realized, we have some young people that may have went down and been a part of, the old system, DJJ or CYA, and they're coming home, in their late 30s, early 40s. And sometimes, or most of the time, there aren't really any healing spaces or folks really supporting those folks once they re-enter the community. So I'm able to hold space for them as well in that process as we work to on a reentry plan and finding them resources and other things to support their needs as they transition back in the community. What really brings me to this work in particular is, my own personal lived experiences as a, formerly incarcerated person, a systems impacted person, someone that was in the foster care system, also as a youth, being in both the juvenile halls here in the Bay Area, in Richmond and over in Hayward as well, and also, doing time, in prison and whatnot for 7 years. So, now, I've been home about 12 years now. I've been super involved and done so much work, and, to the point where now it's like, what does this look like when it comes to supporting our younger folks, right? That are still experiencing, similar things that, that were going on back in the late 80s and early 90s, where their personhood and who they are being criminalized, right? Even during this pandemic, we've seen a resurgence of language referring to young people as super predators and, referring to their builds and how they're looking and, all those things like that from JIOs in our juvenile hall here in Alameda, right? And continuing to advocate for the use of chemical spray agents, military grade spray agents to spray young people down in our juvenile halls. But yet, we have teachers, in the Oakland Unified School District with overcrowded classrooms with sometimes 30 to 40 students, and they're able to break up fights and they don't even have pepper spray, right? To even some of the women on here that may want to carry pepper spray for their own personal protection, they don't even have access to military grade pepper spray. But yet we have GIOs in units that have less than maybe 20 young people in a unit and talking about they need to use chemical agent sprays, right? Or continue to use the practice of prone restraints, right? The same prone restraints that were used to kill, they end up murdering several folks with the knees in the back and in chokeholds and things like that, right? So, and really this just comes down to a legacy of this country that has always relied on punishment, the dehumanization of young people, right? I think there was even one point in time in this country's early colonial history where young people, according to the Puritans, were referred to as demonic, right? And needing to be punished in certain ways, right? And next thing you know, several hundred years later, we have our reform schools, right? These are our first juvenile halls, right? That are, again, we're sending our young kids to these schools to, so-called to get refined and things like that. And, this country has a culture of dehumanizing and, causing harm to young folks, right? And we wonder why a lot of our communities are still experiencing some of the things that we're experiencing today when it comes to trauma, right? Some of our most vulnerable people are young people, right? And we don't really honor young people the way that we should. One of the things that's been really enlightened for me the last several years is our youth leadership development that's taken place with a lot of community-based organizations, really making the strides and effort to create spaces for young people to not only develop their leadership, but also to put it into practice, right? To speak for themselves, to understand public policy, to understand the laws, right? Their rights, things like that, so they can go back into their communities equipped with that information and knowledge to share with their peers. And a lot of the things that we're starting to see now in our community, especially with young Black and brown kids, is, they're feeling empowered to use their voice, right? They're showing up to the Board of Supervisors meetings, right? To demand they be treated and be seen as human beings, right? Human beings that are capable of fully developing and becoming the best versions of themselves, right? But we have folks, some of our leaders, people that still are reliant on these archaic, draconian methods of dealing with young folks, right? And oftentimes it continues to reproduce and reify harm that all of our young folks experience. And even amongst all of that, right? Some of the data shows that, our young people, they're not struggling, right? They're not committing the same rate of crime as it was maybe 30 or 40 years ago. There's been a steep decline in all forms of crime or violence and crime like that, right? But the narrative continues to get pushed out there that these wild, dangerous children are here causing harm in the community, and that's not necessarily the case. The data doesn't necessarily bear that out as well. Even recently, maybe about 3 months ago, it was reported that, the crime in Oakland in particular is down 30% compared to what it was last year. And as of like last month, we're starting to see the same rate of crime that we were experiencing back in 2019 when it was really low. So instead of us continuing to push these narratives about young folks, right, we need to really think about what was happening in 2019, right? The pandemic hit, and then where are we at now post-pandemic, right? Like what happened during the pandemic that led to these spikes and, crime and drug use and all these other things that are across the board, and what it is that we're experiencing now. One thing I can tell you for certain, just working closely with young folks, right, is really, seeing their resiliency, right? Seeing them wanting to find ways to better themselves, to improve themselves, right? And what it comes down to is all of us taking responsibility in that, making sure that we're creating resources, that we're actually investing in young people's future, especially those young folks that come from historically marginalized communities. Oftentimes, when they talk about, these areas that got high crime rates or whatnot, these also tend to be the same neighborhoods that were affected by Jim Crow, vagrancy laws, redlining, you name it. These very same communities are the same communities that were affected by policies that were made by adults decades ago that are affecting the young people today. And a lot of us don't really think about it like that because we like to look at stuff in a vacuum, or we like the other groups of people to feel good about ourselves. And ultimately, we just continue down this cycle of continuing to cause harm to young folks. And even with that, the common through line through all of this is these are neighborhoods that have been under-resourced, right? And also at the same time, hyper-criminalized and over-policed, right? So there's a direct connection there, right? So I like to pull this example. I know pretty much folks are familiar with the defund the police, slogan and stuff that was going around, all across the nation, right? And, there's this narrative out here that the reason why we're experiencing this high crime rate because the police were defunded. Well, here in Oakland in particular, the police were never defunded. As a matter of fact, as of 6 or 8 months ago, they received another pay increase, about 300%, right? But there's still narratives out here that, the reason why this crime rate is happening or whatnot, and no one's doing anything is because we defunded the police. That's not the case. Now you have folks going after Prop 47, right? All these different things where they're trying to, they're grasping for straws to put out a narrative out there that we need to invest more in punishment as opposed to investing in healing, investing in skill building, trade programs, heck, opening up more schools instead of closing them, right? All those things that really contribute to building healthy, safe, thriving communities that young people want to be a part of. Instead of us taking money from those things, we actually need to be pouring more money into those things. I do want to bring up also recently, Urban Peace Movement held a festival at the lake called Town Up Tuesday. This is our third year hosting that event. When we first started it was about 1,500 people. This recent event, it was close to 4,200 people at this event, right? Mostly this festival is led by young people. And this is the thing that doesn't get talked about. A lot of the young people were part of organizing and putting this stuff together. They let us know which artists they wanted to have there, right? They took up a lot of leadership role in that space. And most importantly, we were able to have families, community folks, people that have experienced all kinds of adverse childhood traumas or different, modes of violence or whatnot, all to be able to be in the same space without the heavy police presence and have a good time and really heal and share amongst each other, right? Unfortunately, we had that incident that happened, last week for Juneteenth, right? But for the most part, that was pretty peaceful. There wasn't too many incidents happening there, right? And then also, with that, we just had Lake Fest this past weekend. There was no violence or anything that you could think of, right? But people are still focused on the Juneteenth shooting and then using that as a narrative to say, oh, we need to over police or do this whole thing. But we have multiple events that have taken place, First Fridays, you name it, where there wasn't no violence or anything taking place. And you have thousands of people convening to build and be in community amongst each other. So I feel there's a disconnect. And what ends up happening on the backdrop is we're going to blame young people and say it's young people that's doing all this stuff when that's not necessarily the case, right? You have people that need access to mental health services, diversion programs, therapy, you name it, heck, need employment, housing. These are all these issues at the foundation that need to be addressed before we can actually get to a place where, young people feel safe in their communities, right? And I lastly want to end it with, we did have listening sessions that led up to a campaign where young people are going to start really talking about, the sacredness of themselves, right? And really starting to push those narratives out, because we typically, when we're having these conversations, young people are not at the table. They're not a part of these conversations, right? And we have a lot of adults with their own biases, traumas that haven't been dealt with, coming up with policies and things that's going to be affecting not only this generation, but 2 or 3 generations behind us. And if we really want to get to a place where young people feel safe, they feel honored, and want to, be contributing members of our society, we need to make sure that they're being a part of all of these conversations when it comes to developing policies and laws that ultimately are going to be affecting them when it's their turn to create the vision that they want to see for society. So that's all I want to add.
Thank you, Dudene. We really appreciate it. And thank you for being here. That was very impactful, and it was really great to hear about your experiences with the Urban Peace Movement and all the work you're doing in Oakland. I'd now like to pass it over to Annalisa, and then after she presents, we'll move into question and answer from the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Annalisa Ruiz. I'm the Policy Director of Young Women's Freedom Center, and I'm based in San Jose. So I was born and raised here, so I speak directly not only to the experience of young people today that I've worked with, but also my own experience growing up in a hyper-criminalized neighborhood where I experienced contact with every part of the system. Prior to this role, I spent the last 8 years working with young folks who are incarcerated in Santa Clara County and coming home after incarceration, even from DJJ or CYA, as Diodane and Jasmine had mentioned. But Young Women's Freedom Center is a statewide organization working to decarcerate and decriminalize young women, gender nonconforming youth, and trans youth of all genders in California. We have sites in San Jose, Oakland, San Francisco, Richmond, and Los Angeles. And in addition to mentorship, advocacy, and employment that we offer to those impacted by incarceration, foster care, poverty, street survival, we expand our efforts across the state through policy, budget, and administrative advocacy. But this movement to decarcerate and decriminalize women, girls, and trans folks really spiked when folks started realizing the racial and gender disparities amongst the incarcerated population of girls. And it became clear that this was an issue of criminalization through policies that failed to address race and gender inequities. At the center, we collaborate with young folks on research through the Youth Participatory Action Research Model, where young leaders gather data and conduct interviews or surveys to illuminate the experiences of our communities and inform policy recommendations that would best improve the issues that are highlighted. Over the last couple of years, we've done multiple research projects, both internally and in collaboration with Vera Institute. Our most recent reports have included research around the criminalization of young people, the inequities faced by young parents, and the experiences of those currently and formerly incarcerated. Today, I'll be focusing more on some of the main findings that our research found to be common pathways into the legal system. I want to thank you, Diodane and Jasmine, for talking more about some of the work that's happening on the ground, because all that is so important and comes along with all of this. But girls and gender-expansive youth often encounter the youth legal system as a result of their response to trauma, violence, and discrimination. Thank you for the chat. Once in the system, they continue to be criminalized for the same underlying needs, making it difficult to disentangle themselves from the legal system and access the supports that they need to heal and that they need for healing and long-term well-being. Family violence, crossover from the child welfare system, CSEC, school pushouts and arrests, VOPs, which are violations of probation, CSEC is commercial sexually exploited children, and behavioral and mental health needs are all drivers to this revolving door that young women of color experience in California. California's juvenile legal system has significant racial disparities, with Black, Indigenous, and Latinx girls overrepresented throughout compared to their white counterparts, making ending girls' incarceration and criminalization an urgent matter of race equity. At every major system point, Latinx young people are the largest proportion of girls, and at most system points represent the majority of young people. Black and Indigenous girls are referred, detained, placed, and given wardship at higher rates than white girls, up to nearly 7 times the rates. This disparity has increased over time. In another research project done in 2019, youth from Santa Clara County found that while Latinx girls made up only 30% of the population of youth in Santa Clara County, they made up almost 80% of the young women incarcerated, and 70% of those had gang affiliations written down in their files. While this specific research was done locally in Santa Clara County, it's not far off from statewide data. Youth agreed that this is aligned with their experiences in their communities. They told us that the stereotypes they face in law enforcement is a major issue, especially for gender nonconforming youth who present as masculine. Gender nonconforming youth specifically are often targeted, harassed, and humiliated by law enforcement in their communities under the assumption that they're gang affiliated because of the way they dress, the neighborhoods they're born into. Sometimes the neighborhoods they're forced even to move into because of poverty. There's very little options, but making it dangerous to walk to school, work, or take public transportation. According to the most recent statewide research we did, many girls and gender expansive youth's first contact with law enforcement happens at a young age. The juvenile court and probation statistical system documents that age at first referral alongside the other details of each case. The most recent available data shows that the average age at which girls and gender expansive youth received their first probation referral was just under 15 years old, with some as young as 5. The data shows that Black, Indigenous, Latinx, and Southeast Asian girls were first involved in the system at younger ages than others. In our research, many interviewees discussed how housing instability, family conflict, and abuse contributed to system involvement. Housing is the most common and persistent obstacle faced by poor communities of color in California. Stable housing provides the foundation for people to focus on the aspects of their lives and to build skills and practices that will create self-determined futures. Without stable housing, participants are at risk of losing their children or had to spend a majority of their time looking for a place to stay at night. One young person stated, "Throughout the years when I was arrested and put on probation, I didn't have a stable home. So for any little violation, I would just be put into the hall." Several interviewees described fleeing abusive or negligent foster homes, which led to police contact. Sophie stated, "I grew up in the system. I was born and taken away from my parents. My parents were in and out of prison. They never got me back. I got adopted by my foster mom when I was 5, which was also not an ideal home. I was tormented and verbally abused and emotionally abused by her biological children. Obviously, there's a reason I was running away from there." Family instability also contributed to the arrest for minor infractions. Another young person described how her first arrest resulted from a conflict with her mother. "I was 15, my mom had pressed charges against me saying that I'd hit her, and I ended up getting a citation, showing up to court. The first court date I took a deal for some time in juvenile hall." Family conflict was also often the result of survival needs or self-defense. One other young person recalled her first time that she was arrested, in which she was in a physical altercation with her mom, due to a partner that was allegedly in some type of relationship with the younger sibling. These two stories are not uncommon for many of the young women in the cycle of incarceration. Oftentimes, young people are detained because, as a result of these conflicts, they're arrested and left with little to no housing options. The next one that folks highlighted was schools. So I know that my fellow panelists spoke to the experiences in schools too, but others in our research articulated their thoughts on the role of schools in both funneling them into the criminal systems and trapping them there, including for rambunctious behavior expected of young people during adolescence rather than criminal behavior. One young person described her first arrest, which happened at school. The first time I went to jail was because I got into an altercation with school staff. It was a bus helper. When kids got off to school, her role was to make sure they monitor them and make sure they sit quietly. I understand some people can't tolerate kids, but we should be able to, once we get out of school, we're excited. We have a lot of energy. So most of the time kids look loud, but the bus monitor was trying to tell me to get off the bus because I guess the kids were being loud and it was an altercation. So I went to jail for that. One young person described her cycle in and out of school and detention. That's where it all started. She was 13 years old. She went in and out for not coming home on time, for being late. And then when she got into the system for violations, dirty tests, or not obeying school rules. The third common pathway for girls in the system is girls involved in the underground street economy. This is a growing issue, especially in the Bay Area, where girls are seeking economic opportunities to survive living in one of the most expensive areas in the country. Due to the time, I won't go into too much of the data, but I can provide the reports if anyone's interested in reading more. But this is one of the most common factors of criminalization of young women. While not a threat to public safety, CSEC girls are often brought in by law enforcement and kept incarcerated for concern of their own safety. These young women are often struggling with substance use, but given little to no resources to be able to heal from these experiences. Recently, Loyola Law also came out with a report titled Labor Trafficking by Forced Criminality, and it discusses exploitation in a way that we often don't think about when it comes to young women, but in my experience, it is very real, where we see these young women being detained by law enforcement and taking charges as a result of sometimes abusive relationships or relationships in which young women are groomed. And I'm not recommending or advocating for criminalization of anyone in the situation, but what I am highlighting is that there's a need of spaces for healing where young people are safe to heal and be taken out of the survival mode so that these cycles don't continue. Just real quick, there was like another report we did where a young person said, I didn't even realize I was in survival mode until I was taken out of it and I felt safe. I didn't know all my life I was living in survival. But again, for the sake of time, I'll wrap up my portion of this panel, but I do want to thank you all for this opportunity and for taking the time to listen to what's happening with the hyper-criminalization of our young people. I encourage everyone in a position in which they're in direct contact with vulnerable youth to challenge your own bias and understanding of youth and know that youth are experts. And as Diudane said, they need to be seen as sacred, but also as thought partners. If you're interested in any of the reports that I mentioned in my in the last couple of minutes, and please reach out, and I'm always happy to further discuss some of those findings. And there's also a ton of policy recommendations too. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Thank you, all three panelists, for this powerful presentation on criminalizing youth. I'm sure you have stimulated everyone's thoughts and provided great information about some of the problems, the challenges, and solutions. So at this point, it is 11:45 and we have time. I will turn it back over to our co-chairs for a 20-minute Q&A and discussion by the board members with these three panelists. So Co-Chair Rivera and Co-Chair Sierra.
Great. Thank you so much, Aisha. And thank you, panel members. This is really, really appreciate your presentations, and you're giving us a lot to think about, giving me a lot to think about. I want to open it up to our board members. If any of you would like to have any comments or questions of our board, of our panel members. You can just jump in. Okay, we have Andrea, our co-chair, Andrea Guerrero.
Yes, I wanted to thank all of the panelists. That was really, really helpful to hear. And I really appreciated you bringing in the anecdotes that you did and your call for us to be listening to the affected community of which you are a part, you have been. So this has been one of the most meaningful segments of input for me. And my hope is that you all talked about various reports or projects or efforts that you've been a part of. It would be really helpful for the board to have links to the things that you think are going to be the most informative for us, what we can digest and consider putting into the report for the broader community to have in front of them. So thank you for that. And DOJ staff, it would be great if you could follow up with them and get those things. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. And Rich Randolph. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. You guys were awesome, and I commend you in all your efforts as leaders, definitely being collaborators. I just had some questions for on reference to Stockton here. First of all, I got to tell you, as a Black male who grew up in California and now a police chief, I totally understand where you guys are coming from. We do have a lot of work to do, and I will say, in law enforcement, we have adjusted and we're continuing to adjust every day, and I see it as a chief and I pass it on. So I want to thank you. I do think that we have worked quite a bit to counter the school to prison pipelines with the modifications of juvenile laws. California has set the tone as far as now getting rid of the youth authority, no longer having the juvenile youth accountability. Now everything, governor closing down all of our juvenile facilities now, definitely trying to wrap up that school to prison pipeline so it no longer is an issue. But as far as Stockton goes, I just had a question, Jasmine. I love everything you did. I wish we would have counted you a little bit more. You were a part of the community advisory group, right?
Yes.
I wish you would have talked a little bit about this, because it would have set an example of what collaboration does. I saw the Attorney General was involved in this, the Attorney General's office with the Stockton Unified School District. You were a part of that. You guys did a phenomenal job as far as collaboration goes. And I went in, I ran the numbers prior to this meeting. So Stockton, with well over 36,000 students, and you're right, the numbers were very high, and Black and brown, absolutely. Now, just seeing the numbers last year, 22 arrests, and those were violent. So I wanted to commend you, okay, for things like that. I wish we would have talked a little bit about that, because that's what I guarantee you. I'll pat yourself on the back. So that collaboration right there sets the tone of what we want to do throughout our state. So thank you. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was lost in my notes and I was trying to find it, and then afterwards I realized, like, oh, there was a whole.
You were wrapped up in the moment. You were passionate, just like I am. We're all passionate. We all want what's best for our youth, and I will tell you that. So all of you are here for a reason, and that's what this board is for too. Sometimes we disagree, and I will tell you, we in law enforcement have done things differently in the past, and we are changing drastically, and the laws are changing drastically. I heard also we talked about the legal. I'm glad you talked about the legal representation. That is law now. I can't talk to a juvenile unless they have that legal representation. And the way we now deal with youth on our campuses, granted, I'm at a college, but I was out of school, high school, for 5 years, so I know exactly the majority of the things that we used to write tickets for: truancy, SARB, 308B, tobacco, 11357, possession of marijuana. Those things are gone now. They are no longer in law now. Now you're seeing law enforcement, whether you're a K through 12 police or a community college police, you're seeing us involved at being present on diversion programs and violence, and definitely building bridges and collaboration. I did have a question for Debonet. Did I say it correctly, sir? Debonet, I love what you guys are doing as far as resources go. I just want to know, because I didn't hear anything about human trafficking. Are you seeing that at all? And what's you guys' involvement, or what would you do as far as human trafficking goes if it comes across your desk?
I'm going to be honest with you. Our org doesn't necessarily specifically focus on trafficking, right? But I know there are other orgs that we collaborate with, that do CSEC work. I know Young Women's Freedom Center, in a different type of capacity, supports in that way. But if we do come across or hear anything, because we are mandated reporters, right, and we work with a lot of families that may be experiencing something like that, we're able to collaborate with our partners to really think about how best to serve that young person or that family, for that matter. So I think that's like the extent that I can kind of speak to it on that. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. I think we had a question from Chauncey Smith. Let's see. Chauncey, did you want to, did you have a comment?
If you are speaking, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I have a few questions for the panelists. But first, I want to thank you all for sharing your stories and your policy recommendations. I think they're very helpful for having a holistic understanding and well-rounded context for this discussion today. And I have at least 2 or 3 questions for you. So, and I'll open it up to whoever feels like they have something to share in regards to these. One is, what are your thoughts to the role of police in schools? I asked that question because in Los Angeles, we've been seeing a growing movement to shift to approaches to dealing with adolescent behavior in schools without the use of law enforcement within them. So I would like to see from your perspective, what else are you hearing in different regions throughout the state? Another thing I'd like to ask you to respond to is, what are your thoughts in regards to searches of youth? So I heard some concerns about pepper spray, military grade pepper spray and things like that, or uses of force. But what about searches? Particularly, I'm thinking about the fact that youth are underage, and then officers are obviously adults, and how that age difference can impact interactions. And then third, I also heard from you, Jasmine, you mentioned a little bit about youth being profiled as gang members, and I want to see if you can tease it out a little bit more so we can have a better understanding of what that looks like for folks in Stockton. Thank you.
Yeah, I did want to speak to the less presence of police on school campuses, right? One of the things that's really been called to action that for some reason doesn't get highlighted is really a call for a different approach outside of what we've been doing with policing when it comes to young folks, right? And trying to limit the early interactions with police by young people, because it is a traumatizing experience, and really a call for those in leadership to find alternatives, to find credible messengers, to find other people that can interact with young folks, whether there's a crisis or something happening on campus, long before we get to law enforcement. Like literally, law enforcement should be the last option, not the very first option. And as you've heard from some of my colleagues as well, like that early interaction with law enforcement literally sets up the course of which a young person is going to find themselves in and out of the system, or and most importantly, find themselves in vulnerable situations. And then also too, if law enforcement is involved, there has to be a trusted person there with that young person while they're interacting with law enforcement. That could be a family member, right? That can be an aunt. That can be an extended family member, someone that young person trusts before they actually are having that interaction with that person, just to create a sense of transparency and safety for all parties involved. And it's really a call for us to really think differently about the way we approach policing and interactions with the system, because we have too much data out there that shows that when those interactions happen, they don't necessarily lead to the type of results that we want, in which a young person is able to still feel redeemed, feel safe in those situations, and be able to continue on with their lives. The opposite happens, right? Another thing too is that the data has shown it, right? Locking people up hasn't made our communities even safe. They've never made our communities safer. We're still dealing with issues from 20, 30 years ago, decisions that were made 20, 30 years ago that are directly impacting a lot of our folks today, right? And haven't made our communities any even more safety. And really, it's just a call for everybody to think differently about how we address the needs of young people and other folks that have been historically marginalized in our communities. And that's really what that kind of speaks to in regards to that, right? For instance, at one point in time, I was working at Encinal High School there in Alameda, and I was one of the life coaches on campus that they would call on to go deal with a young person when they were going through a crisis. Now, if there was a situation that called for law enforcement to get involved, I served as that liaison to be able to mitigate any other potential things that might happen and before we get to the law enforcement. And it's really trying to create that as a practice where we have community involved in that process, other folks involved in this process of dealing with that crisis or intervention before law enforcement comes involved, if that makes any sense. And that also applies to if someone's dealing with a mental health crisis, right? Really getting people that are more in position to deal with those type of instances before we actually get involved with the police, right? So that's really what that idea is, just for us to start doing something different, because what we've already been doing clearly has shown that it doesn't work. So that's what that's about. So
Thank you. We have a couple more questions. I know we're getting close to our time, but I want to make sure to get everybody's in. I think the next one was Pastor Kreiner. Not, you may be on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, my question was already asked previously by the previous board member, but I'll kind of just dive a little bit deeper into it. First of all, thank you so much for your amazing oratorial skills when it comes to addressing the concerns that were at hand. I believe to Jasmine, fellow Stocktonian, I was born and raised in Stockton, so know exactly what you're speaking of. Franklin High School is my alma mater, and the Yellow Jackets beat up on the Vikings quite often when I was a kid. I do have a question regarding the law enforcement in schools when we're speaking of resource officers, and there's a catch-22, right? There is an excessive amount of interaction between law enforcement and students, but there's also that concern that I have when it comes to the need of resource officers in school. Maybe not police officers, but I do like the term resource officers, not uniformed, more dressed down, more casual, more individuals that can handle and address the concerns of what our kids are due to the violence that occurs from outside resources coming into our schools. Can some of you all speak to that just a little bit regarding that when it comes to these nationwide shootings that occur, and of course those that feel the need to arm themselves and the lack of policy that does not address the addressing of arms? What is your views on making sure we do have adequate resource officers in schools or not when it comes to the violent tendencies that occurs from outside coming in?
Well, I mean, I could speak quickly to this. This is something that our coalition at the Stockton Education Equity Coalition speaks of very often. When we talk about law enforcement, we talk about just the safety on schools and what that looks like. Oftentimes, I mean, we've seen in Stockton Unified, you probably are familiar with Cleveland Schools Remembers. It was a school that was shot at the time, and it was targeted towards shooting Southeast Asians, refugees, specifically Cambodian. And when that school shooting happened, it was the largest school shooting that happened in the country, and it was in Stockton. But oftentimes what was not expressed was that there was already existing law enforcement agencies, there was an existing school district police agency that existed at that time. And we see that existing law enforcement agencies have always been on campuses where shootings have happened. So it's not the assumption that law enforcement are keeping schools safe often because of folks who are coming in. I think it's the conditions that we want to address. You know, the homes, why, asking the questions why people need to carry, and how do we create more solutions to addressing safety as a shared safety model. We're really using the approach. There is more data and research on the shared safety model, and the Californians for Safety and Justice uses that model, and we've been trying to implement that model across different districts across Stockton and also across the state. So, I mean, I would just start there. I know that oftentimes there are other bigger issues and means that young people, not just young people are bringing guns into school, but those around us. And I think we just have to change the conditions of how we approach this conversation.
Thank you, sis. Great answer.
Thank you. And I believe we have a question from Chief Phyllis.
Hi, yeah, morning. So I think it was last of Sorrel, but to Miss Lisa, she made some great points on the development of the human mind, the adolescent mind, and probably good reason why the voting age may need to be raised. I might steal some of those points, but I was curious if that research of the adolescent mind changed whether it was a two-parent or a single-parent home.
I would have to say it doesn't seem to have anything to do with who or the number of parents. I think it probably is the same in Somerville, Massachusetts, as in Salinas, California. Environmental factors can exacerbate or calm some of those manifestations. For instance, having enough adults in a young person's life to be supportive and offer guidance and help them navigate life is critical, but it doesn't matter what their position is to the youth. It doesn't have to be a parent, it can be other members of the family, and certainly some of the people who've just spoken, like Jasmine and Dieudonné, and I'm sorry, the third person, demonstrate how youth workers sometimes way too late in the game, because we're not giving youth support earlier, act very much like surrogate parents and co-regulators of young people's feelings. So I don't think it has to do with the number, gender, or anything else of parents. Maybe, Chief, one thing I would add, I'd go back to how much the environment offers safety nets and supports. And that's more a function of wealth, in my experience, than it is of anything else. And I very much was moved by some of the descriptions Jasmine Dieudonné and the speaker from Women's Freedom Center gave about times when youth were arrested because officers didn't recognize they were poverty-stricken. And I think everybody knows that behavior is a function of perceived options. If you have no other option and you have no adults reaching out to you, you will do things to survive. And what we want to see is officers understand that better, inquire about that before assuming that the behavior is intentional and bad.
Right. So would we agree then strong guardian or parental contact at an early age prior to law enforcement intervention is best for a child?
It is best, absolutely. But I would also agree not living in poverty is good too.
Well, we know that wealth is not indicative of how much time parents spend.
Yeah, that's true.
But I would say, I think a big point here is that law enforcement was never geared to raise children, right? We were not supposed to be the first contact in young people's lives. It was supposed to be guardians or parents. We are not built for that. We've never been designed to be the first contact. And I think a lot of us, the panelists, would agree that's not our role in society, but yet it's been conferred upon us for the lack of strong guardianship or parental presence. And at the end of the day, we in law enforcement don't have the ability to say we're not coming, right? Sorry. We don't get to say, hey, I was on this panel one day and our involvement in this young person's life may traumatize them, so we're not coming out, right? When somebody calls us, we have to go. So it's interesting. And then my last question, and I thank you for that, to Mr. Brow. If the crime in Oakland was down, let's say 30%, and they were funded at 300% increase. Do we think the governor overreacted by sending hundreds of California Highway Patrolmen into Oakland? Or why did he do that?
Well, I'm gonna keep it a buck with you. It wasn't. I know that got highlighted as like the main thing, right? Because a lot of times when it comes to these things, a lot of stuff is performative. But I would be remiss to say there was a convergence of things happening, right? Not only did the governor send reinforcements in, but there were folks on the ground doing the groundwork as well. Whether it was the Department of Violence Prevention, which had folks in the community doing crisis intervention, right? You had Young Women's Freedom Center holding space, supporting young women. You had different orgs that were holding conferences and convenings, right? Urban Peace Movement, we were out in the community holding town halls and informing community folks, doing door knocking, right? Where we have folks step up and start to express the things that they needed in the community, right? And with that, we've seen since then, all those have been contributing factors. Plus, with the governor doing that thing, but that wasn't the only reason why, the so-called crime rate went down. Nonetheless, the reason why I bring that up is because Alameda County is also the same county that spends $1 million a year to lock a young person up. There's only 60 young people at our current juvenile hall right now, and you're spending $1 million per person when you could be taking that money and actually investing in each and every single last one of those individual young people and providing them shelter, right? Helping them find employment, skill training, right? Housing, you name it, all the things that are affecting communities, right, that have been under-resourced, right? That's where funding should be going. And unfortunately, it's not. But we're okay with spending $1 million per kid to keep them locked up. And like that, for me, sounds crazy as heck, because any other system, right, any type of business, you name it, if it's been failing, right, you don't continue to pump money into it. What tends to happen is it gets closed down, which we've seen with a lot of our schools here in Oakland get closed down because they were failing and they weren't producing. But yet we have other institutions that continue to receive funding, and they're also failing as well. And like really, it's a conversation for all of us to think about what it is that we're actually doing with this money, and is it being used appropriately in a way to address the needs of young folks, right? And I'm glad that Lisa brought that up about environment. When you got communities that are under-resourced and underfunded, that creates the type of environment in which young people find themselves in, where they have limited options to a certain degree, right? And I know people love a rags to riches story. Well, I was in this environment and I excelled. Well, yeah, you are an outlier. There's a whole bunch of other young folks that have been in that same experience that are going through different things, and the trauma may be affecting them differently compared to their peers. So that's really what I wanted to. That's what I was really speaking to, right? It wasn't just the governor coming in; it was also other folks from different walks of life in the community that actually care about what's going on in the community, that also help address with the crime rate and things coming down. And oftentimes that narrative doesn't get spoken on or talked about when we're having these conversations.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. I have a question for Aisha. Aisha, what time does our next panel begin?
Perfect timing. I was just releasing my mic to say that we are scheduled for our lunch break, which is 30 minutes. So after our lunch break, then we will come back and go right into panel 2. So it is now 12:11 or 12:15. We can come back at 12:45.
Okay.
If that is your pleasure, and then we will start our second panel.
Okay. Yeah, I think there may have been one last question. So if you have a couple minutes, then I think Rich Randolph, did you have one final question? I saw your hand up earlier.
I'm good, ma'am. I took my hand down and wanted to pass it on to LaWanda or Miss Lily.
Okay.
Lily, I believe you have the floor.
Oh, thank you. Okay. I know we're short on time. I wanted to just circle back to Board Member Smith's questions about searches and also in particular gang member affiliation, so or identification of youth. And I also want to thank the speakers. It was just so great to hear about these initiatives in Stockton and Oakland and San Jose and across the state. Because we're short on time, maybe Jasmine, I just wanted to highlight that thank you for sharing in the chat some of the information about the report and so on about allegations of gang affiliation. And if there was time for you to say a little bit more about that, that's great. And otherwise, I look forward as a board member to reviewing more information. So if we had time for a little bit, another comment on that, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Yes, sure. And Annalisa or others, feel free to chime in. I was just sharing that in particular with one of the biggest things that I've seen around just gang affiliation is it be sort of enhanced and exacerbated and put among young people, where we've just seen higher allegations of young people having to file as or register as a gang member. There's a lot of conversations right now just around how the state is prioritizing, the whole gang database and what's a priority and what's happening. So there's a lot of kind of active changes on it. Our position to it is that, we do believe that there's just a lot of that it's detrimental to young people, the way that gang databases are used, and it also is there's been more consequences legally with young people. The way we've seen gang we're seeing it in two ways. So you have the education system where schools are documenting now students who are affiliated gang members, and they're tracking young people and putting it in their education profiles. Then you have the criminal system that is legally documenting young people. And once the courts have put enough together, whether the DAs or folks are putting information together, they are making recommendations that young people, if they're charged with gang affiliated charges, they then have to register. And these registrations stay with them beyond their youth years. So, usually young people's records get sealed. One of the things that we're finding out is that after their time is served, these young people are still going to be a part of a database post their youth. Post 18, which we also find detrimental in the fact that young people do have the ability to change. Young people do have the ability to create a lifestyle without the means of being categorized as a gang member. So those are some of the things that we've seen. Haircuts in particular have been one of the biggest things that we've seen in courtrooms. Young people who have ducktails are associated gang members. Young people who wear hats and want to wear their favorite football team are now being associated as gang members for wearing and rocking sports attire. So we're seeing a lot of cultural things that are being misappropriated and criminalized, and those are the ways that we are trying to misappropriate, criminalizing things that people enjoy on a regular day basis. So those are some of the things that we've seen, at least on our end.
Thank you. And then I see our panelist, Lisa Thoreau, you have your hand up.
Thank you. I wanted to make one other point. We're an organization that works in about 25 states nationally. And one of the things that we've seen, if you're as old as I am, is in the last 40 years, we've seen the social safety net really dissolve in some places and not exist in others. And one of the key things we try and encourage law enforcement organizations and leaders to do is create partnerships with youth serving community-based organizations to whom they can refer youth. because not every call deserves answering. Many agencies say, no, we can't tell your child how to behave, ma'am. This is your job as a parent. We are not going to come and yell at him for not doing the dishes or for losing their temper. And so just as you're seeing mental health agencies starting to respond to some of these calls for service from parents, like in one county, the mobile psychological or crisis response teams, which are mushrooming all over the country, and that provide families with some of the skills that officers can't give, like how to handle such a situation in the future and what supports parents' needs. I think if law enforcement would share some of these youth with these programs, understand what some of these programs can do in lieu of using arrest or system involvement, we would see better outcomes, much like Dieudonné was describing, and Annalisa, and Annalisa, I'm sorry for forgetting your name before, and Jasmine were showing when community is embraced with law enforcement as a partner to protecting, serving youth and making sure youth are not hurting each other. So these are possible workable solutions, and it's frustrating at times when we see real resistance to it because it would reduce the pressures on law enforcement, which are sizable, because as Chief Thulias said, a lot is asked of them in the ways of response. But there are alternatives if we consider it and build these partnerships and rethink funding.
Thank you very much. So I think that concludes our panel, and to all panel members, panelists, thank you so much. This was really powerful and informative presentations, and that's really going to help us with our work. So thank you very much. And we will take a lunch break and come back at 12:45. Aisha, does
that would be perfect. And we invite and hope that all of the panelists will be able to stay on and hear the other panels if you have time.
Great. So see everybody at 12:45. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to see you all back. I hope you had a nice lunch break. We're able to grab a quick bite to eat, maybe respond to a few of those emails that I'm sure came in. But we'll go ahead and get started here shortly on our second panel. Really looking forward to this discussion as well. Aisha will continue to help host this with us. So we'll just wait a little bit for a few more folks to get joined, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Kendall.
As board members get back from their break, if you could please come on camera to let us know you're here. We just want to make sure we can establish quorum before getting started. Thank you again. Good afternoon again. We're still working on establishing quorum. So once you're back from lunch break, if you could please go back on camera just so we know you're here and we can go ahead and get this panel started. Thank you so much. So it looks like we've achieved quorum, so I'm going to go ahead and hand it back to Aisha Martin Walton.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I am Aisha Martin Walton with the Department of Justice, and if you're just joining us, we are on agenda item 9, which is our second panel for a youth summit, the second of 3 panels today, and it is entitled Investing Upstream. The discussion will be of best practices for probation, diversion, and deflection alternatives, non-carceral, non-police alternative programs for youth, and strategies for investment in the communities. Today on this second panel, we have 3 panelists: Olivia Shields, Justice Transformation Policy Coordinator at the Urban Peace Institute; Gina Warren, CEO and co-founder at the Neighborhood Wellness; and Nancy Juarez, Policy and Communications Analyst at the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice, CJ. And we would like to remind the panelists that you have 10 minutes each, and board members, after each of the panelists speak, you will have an opportunity to ask them questions and engage in a discussion. And then later in the course of the meeting, you'll have board members, you will also have an opportunity to provide some reflections on the entire segment. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and Ms. Shields, if it's okay with you, we would like to go ahead and start with you. So welcome, and you may begin.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Olivia Shields. I'm the Justice Transformation Policy Coordinator at Urban Peace Institute. So honored and excited to be here today to have the opportunity to share about some of the work that I do in LA County with my colleagues, focusing on youth justice transformation. So our goal very much is to not strengthen systems, but rather entirely reimagine the way we support youth and address harm. Go to the next slide. So I will provide a quick grounding in the history and vision of Youth Justice Reimagined, which is a vision created by system-impacted and formerly incarcerated youth who are at the forefront of now implementing Youth Justice Reimagined, and then go through some of the most pressing issues, as well as the solutions, all of which are further outlined in Youth Justice Reimagined, and then close. So the history of YJR, there's quite a bit to it, but I want to try to keep it brief so I can focus more so on the issues and the solutions that we're working through right now. So 2017, the Division of Youth Diversion and Development was created within the Office of Diversion and Reentry. In 2019, if you click again, sorry, there's some movement to the slides. The YDD was launched, and the Board of Supervisors created the Youth Justice Work Group, which is a whole range of stakeholders, but primarily system-impacted and formerly incarcerated youth, who came up with a vision to transform youth justice in LA County, entirely transition away from juvenile probation, and that was Youth Justice Reimagined. So that was passed in 2020 by the Board of Supervisors unanimously. You can click one more time. And there's a whole bunch of different components to Youth Justice Reimagined, some of which I'll talk about today. But I definitely recommend folks taking a look at that report if you want to learn more. And again, this is entirely a community vision. So the alternatives really do require a community lens for building and creation and generation of new concepts that will be specifically tailored to address the needs of the communities who are most impacted by the justice system. And then I also just wanted to briefly mention on the next slide, none of this transformation work would be possible without the youth who are leading the way. So LA Uprising is a coalition that my organization's part of. We're one of 5 founders of the organization. And these youth have been here since the genesis of the work, and they are integral to the current implementation and overcoming the challenges that we face. So in terms of the challenges, I want to touch on detention, the law enforcement budget, and then also lack of coordination. Detention in LA County. So for decades, LA County probation has demonstrated how deeply entrenched the culture of harm and violence and mistreatment of youth has been within its practices. Even in the past few years, it's been failure upon failure that youth are inside these facilities are having to bear the brunt of. So since 2021, LA County probation facilities have cycled in and out of compliance with the Board of State and Community Corrections bare minimum standards.